Welcome back. In today's video we will discuss about the Scrum artifacts and user stories. So hope you have completed the session 1 and session 3, and if you have any doubts or if you want to know, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave your questions in the comment sessions so that I will be answering your questions. Okay, let's look into Scrum artifacts. Basically, there are 4 Scrum artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, burn down charts, and product increments. The Scrum artifacts provides the key information that the Scrum team and the stakeholders need to be aware of, understanding the product under development, the activities done, and the activities being planned in the project. So these artifacts are defined in Scrum process framework. Those are product backlog, sprint backlog, burn down charts, and product increments. So here is the simple representation of the artifacts, where you can see the product backlogs, and from the product backlogs we are deriving the sprint backlog, and for the sprint backlogs are considered in the sprint, and all the backlogs will be completed in the sprint, and finally the team will deliver an incremented product, which is product increment. So let's look into the product backlog. The product backlog is an order list of features that are needed as part of the end product. And it is the single source of requirements for any changes to be made to the product. So the product backlog lists all features, functions, requirements, fixes, and enhancements that constitute the changes to be made to the product in the future releases. So the product backlog items have the attributes of description, order, estimate, and value, which will be discussed in the next session. And the items are normally termed as user stories. So the product owner is the responsible for product backlog. This include the content of the product backlog, the availability. So a product backlogs will normally contains the understood requirements. So the product backlog gets developed as the product and the environment in which it will be used progress. So the product backlog constantly changes in the corporate to make it effective. So as long as the product exists in the organization or in the corporate, the product backlog also exists. So the product is built, the product backlog becomes larger based on the requirements, market conditions, or technology. So the product backlog refinement means the adding the details, estimates, the priority order to the product backlog items. So this is an ongoing process performed by the product owner and the team. The Scrum team decides how and when refinement is to be done. So the product backlog items is primarily updated by the product owner. So the higher ordered product backlog items are usually clearer and detailed than lower order ones.
6 hours and 28 minutes of spacewalking time, which is the equivalent of 62 days
So the product backlog items may be likely the requirements for the upcoming sprint and are refined so that these items can be developed during the sprint.
65, there have been 2 spacewalks. The first conducted by Russian cosmonauts Oleg Novitsky and Pyotr Dubrov.
And here you can see the product backlogs are the stories, epic and stories. So after explaining all these artifacts, I will give you a real-time example so that everyone will be understanding how the product backlog or sprint backlog will look like. So let's look into the product backlog. The sprint backlog is a set of product backlog items that is selected for the particular sprint, which will be decided based on the product increment and realizing the sprint goal. So the sprint backlog is created during the sprint planning. I will say the sprint backlog is a subset of product backlog. So the sprint backlog is a forecast by the team about what functionality will be made available in the next increment and the work needed to deliver that functionality as a working increment. The sprint backlog plan, a sprint backlog is a plan with enough detail that can be understood by the team to track in the daily scrum. The team decides together, modifies the sprint backlog throughout the sprint, and the sprint backlog emerges during the sprint. As the new work is required, the team adds to the sprint backlog. So as work is performed or completed, the estimated remaining work is updated and everything will be updated. So when the elements of the plan are deemed unnecessary, they are removed. So only the team can change the sprint backlog during the sprint.
The next solar array, which remains in its flight support structure on the truss
sprint
of the
backlog
station,
is a real-time picture of the work that the team plans to accomplish during the sprint. So this sprint backlog is owned completely by the team, the Scrum team.
Will be the subject of discussions over the next couple of days.
And finally, it shows continuous improvement and this daily progress, everything. And the sprint backlog is transparent. In Scrum, the transparency is an important pillar where all the sprint backlog, product backlogs, everything, all this will be transparent.
At which time Mark Van de Heij, as
So
we see,
I have explained the two artifacts like product backlog and sprint backlog. I want to point out some differences here. Anything that needed to accomplish the project vision is the product backlog, but anything which is just needed to fulfill that particular sprint or the sprint alone is the sprint. A sprint goal is the sprint backlog. So the product owner owns the product backlog, but sprint backlog is owned by the development team. The product backlog contains requirements, defects, and tasks. The sprint backlog is a subset of product backlog that is defined as the priority by the product owner. So product backlog, everyone contributes to the product backlog, but in sprint backlog only the development team contributes the sprint backlog. Product backlog refinement meeting is to refine the product backlog. However, sprint backlog planning meeting is to refine the sprint backlog items. So now look into the increment. Increment is the sum of all product backlog items completed during a sprint combined with the increments of all previous sprints. So the increment is the sum of all the product backlog items completed during the current sprint plus the combined with the increments of the previous sprint. You can see this, it is the combination of or the output of all the increments of the previous sprint. Here you can see all the sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, all the features for every sprint, few new features or increments will be added, all together gives the increment. So this end of the sprint, a new increment must be a working product, which means it must be a usable condition. So it must be working, it must be in the working condition regardless of whether the product owner decides to actually release it. The Scrum team needs to have what is considered to be an increment. So like the same understanding guides the team in knowing how many product backlog items it can select during the sprint planning. The purpose of each sprint is to deliver increments of potentially releasable functionality. So the team deliver an increment of product functionality every sprint. So this increment is usable, so a product owner may choose to release it immediately. So this increment is the sum of increments of all the previous sprints. So the team deliver an increment of product functionality every sprint, and each increment is additive to all prior increments and thoroughly tested, ensuring that all the increments should work together.
Shane Kimbrough back inside the equipment lock of the Quest airlock.
Any one product should have a definition of increment that it has a standard for any work done on it. So that's all about increment, and let's move on to the sprint burn down chart, which is the fourth artifact. And at any point in a time of sprint, the total work remaining in the sprint backlog can be summed. So the team tracks the total work remaining for every daily scrum to project the likelihood of achieving the sprint goal. So by tracking the remaining work throughout the sprint, the team can manage its progress. In this situations, the sprint burn down chart comes into play. Like, is the practice of trending the work expended by the Scrum team. So the sprint burn down chart is the useful technique in monitoring the sprint progress towards the sprint goal. So here you can see how many story points is remaining in the sprint backlog and the days in the sprint. So suppose if there are 10 days for a sprint or 10 days for a sprint, and you can see the total number of story points that for the particular sprint has been taken as 30. So you can see on the first day the 30 story points is remaining, and on the second day it is around 28 or 20 the story points, few story points have been done, and by third it will come by fifth you can see it will come around 20 or 15 to 20. By the end of 10th day, all the story points have been completed for the sprint backlogs. So this is how the sprint backlog gives you the track of the total remaining at least at every sprint review. So the product owner will compare the amount with work remaining in the previous sprint reviews to the access process towards the completing projected work by the desired time for the goal. So this information is also shared with the stakeholders. The product owner and the Scrum Master will have regular discussion based on the burn down chart. For this particular, they will discuss like for this particular sprint, these many story points are remaining, and suppose for the sprint 3, all the story points have been completed. Like that, they will have a comparison and discussion. Okay, now I will give you what is user stories, and As you understand, this user story are commonly used to describe the product features and will form a part of Scrum artifacts, product backlog and sprint backlog. So in software development, like the product features play a crucial role. So it's features that user ultimately like to use in the final product. So they are known as requirements in the general terminology. The software development project success lies in understanding the user requirements accurately and appropriately. So this will be implemented to get the final product with all the features that has been planned before. So the requirements or product features need to be thoroughly known to the development team. So the user stories came into existence for the product features. So the user story is from the user perspective regarding what he or she wants to have rather than what the system can do for him. So thus the view changed for the product to user completely. The user stories became a standard for requirements in all agile frameworks. So in Scrum projects, the product backlog is a list of user stories. The user stories estimation is also based on the user stories, and the size of the product is estimated in user story points. So the user story structure will be like this: as a type of user, as a type of user, like I want to perform some task so that I can achieve some goals or any values or benefits. So this writing a user story, it define your end user, specify what they want, describe the benefit, add acceptance criteria. So let us look into a user story that is framed from the scenario of a bank customer withdrawing cash from ATM. The user story will be like this: as a customer, I want to withdraw cash from ATM so that I don't have to wait in line at the bank. So each story, user story, has an acceptance criteria defined so that the correctness of implementation of user story is confirmed that it has passed the acceptance test. So that's about the user story. And writing the user story, the product owner is responsible for the product backlog, and also the product owner is responsible for the user stories. However, it does not mean that product owner only alone writes the user stories. Anyone in the Scrum team can write the user stories, and also it is possible to add the non-functional requirements also in the user stories. So the user stories are managed in the product backlog. The user stories are ordered according to the priority. The most prioritized user stories are refined to granular level, while the less priorities user stories are kept at a lesser detail level. Okay, this is a sample user story. Like as an account manager, I want a sales report for my account to be sent to my inbox daily so that I can monitor the sales progress of my customer portfolio. And acceptance criteria: the report is sent daily to my inbox. The report contains the following sales details. The report is in CSV format. So I will give you some benefits of user stories. The major benefit of user story is the user-centric definition itself. Like ultimately the user who will be using the product in the relevant user scenarios, it connects the end users to the team members. So it brings the user closer, makes the product development revolve around the customer value by focusing on user needs. Highest value delivery. So helps to deliver customer focused features that yields highest value. Encourages the collaboration among the user, product owner and the development team. So this connects the end users to all the team members. Shared understanding. It helps to develop understanding of user needs through conversations. Boosts transparency and building blocks of the product. So each user story incrementally adds customer value to the product, brings the user closer. So these are the benefits of user stories. So this that comes the end of the session. If you have any doubts or any questions, you can leave as a comment and I will be glad to help you out. And thank you for watching. Let's meet in the next video. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe the channel and share with your friends if anyone is needed for the Scrum training.